I think we're ready to begin now. We have some guests also, or at least one I see. Call the meeting to order, and I think I'll skip the minutes of the last meeting because Janet, did you get them out?
I sent.
Did you get, Janet, did you get the meeting minutes?
I sent them to everyone.
Yeah, they were sent out about a week ago.
Okay. Well, I don't know where mine are either. So I think we'll go right to the article that we need to discuss, which is the park grant and some changes that have come along, and what that means to us. So if Ed is still hiding someplace, I don't see him on my screen right now, but
I'm here.
Okay, do you want to explain what we have to do with a park grant?
Sure. So the requirement from the state, because it's a reimbursable grant, is the town has to appropriate the funds for the entire project, which is $192,500. So what town council has done in the wording, and it would move forward if the CPC committee votes approval of it, is $192,500 would be approved by the CPC for this project. It's a reimbursable grant, and what would happen is the town's still committed to fundraise $6,000. So once the project was completed and we file for our reimbursement, we would be eligible for a $100,000 reimbursement from the state. So the way the new wording in that article is that any reimbursement that comes back to the state would be put back into the CPC undesignated account. So it should be $100,000 coming back. It would be $100,000 going back into CPC. We could work it so that all the fundraising money is also eligible. So reimbursement would all come back to CPC, go into the undesignated, and the net funds that should end up coming out of the undesignated or undesignated fund for a net would still be the 86.5, which was originally intended.
Okay, anybody got questions?
That's me.
Okay,
I'm Cindy. Is that okay, Bob, if I start?
sure,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, so two questions come to mind. I don't remember this thing about the town has to raise $6,000. Somebody can tell me what I've forgotten, or if I didn't hear about that before. That's one question. And the second sort of general question, Ed, is this pretty standard when we talk about raising funds, or I should say utilizing CPC funds where we believe there's a grant involved and there's a match required, and the only source of funding we generally have is CPC, and therefore we have to remember to put in the request for the full amount that's needed, and then have the 50% that's reimbursed from whatever the grant is go back into CPC. Is that's two questions.
Okay, so let me tackle the first one. And no, that is, the full funding is particular to some of the grants, which this park grant is. It is not indicative of all the reimbursable grants.
Okay. And the other question was what it was about this 6,000.
That was part of the original budget that was submitted to the state, was that the town would fundraise $6,000 to go towards this project.
The original request to CPC from Parks Commission said that there would have been $6,000 available from their organization. And that's where that $6,000 came in. And the original request called for $86,500 from CPC and $100,000 available from other sources, meaning the
Park grant.
The grant.
Correct. Yeah.
While I have the floor, procedurally, I'm a little bit concerned about where we stand here because we have approved the original request, which I am going to use the term as being a inaccurate request. And therefore, before we were to discuss and act on a new request, which has yet to be presented to us here, we need to somehow or other rescind what we did at our last meeting in approving that original request.
Well, we can do that. If all it requires is somebody to make a motion to rescind what we voted on at the last meeting.
That's a little dangerous until we have a certainty about whether or not we're going to be able to vote for the new request.
Well, the point, Cindy, my point here is that that original request is invalid.
Yeah.
And so our action on that request as a committee is invalid. So let's, what I'm suggesting here is that we need to dispose of that quote, quote, error before we take any other action.
Okay.
Yeah, if we don't move forward, well, one way or another, we've got to change what we voted on.
Right.
And then move forward
So,
and decide what we want to do about this new request.
so I would like to make a motion then that we invalidate the vote. I'd like to move that we invalidate the vote taken on, I don't know what the date was, such and such a date, regarding the Parks Commission request for funding.
Is there a second to this so that we can discuss
I
it?
second it. I second it.
Okay. Any other comments? Any questions?
Do we know the total amount in the open space bucket?
I do not right now.
Hang on, let me see if I can get into that file and I'll let you know.
I mean, there's 270,000 that is also being requested. I'm just wondering if adding another 100,000 is within the balance of that account.
It would
Coming
be
from
100
undesignated, not open space.
Yeah, it would be 106,000, but let me just see what I can find here.
But Maureen, we have a motion on the floor that we need to get rid of before we discuss what the future motion will be.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Virginia?
Yep. I'm waiting.
No, that's okay. We can go ahead on.
Yeah, I'll look for this. You go ahead.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Well, I guess so. So would you identify yourself and say yes or no?
Bob Kozub, yes.
Brown, yes.
Simmons, yes.
Groden, aye.
Palmer, yes.
Lizinski, aye.
Kemp abstain. Not really clear what we did incorrect last meeting because I was not there.
Okay. Any other abstentions? Any nays? Okay. It is rescinded. So now we need to move to looking at the present request, which is for well, it would be for a total of
$192,500.
okay, I'm not seeing it, but I know where it should be. Yes, 192,500.
Correct.
And have you found, Ed, did you find the total yet?
No, not yet. I'm still looking.
Okay,
Again, Virginia, procedurally here, I mean, I hate to do this, but I want us to be legal here.
yeah,
Do we have before us a formal request from somebody, meaning Parks and Rec, I would presume, for this $192,000, or are we relying on the article which will become before town meeting when it occurs? Do we have a formal request?
You would be relying on my request to alter that, Robert.
okay. So we do have a request.
Thank you.
So I can make a motion. I move that this committee approve the use of $192,500 to be taken from undesignated for the work to be done at Conant Park that has been previously discussed, with the plan that once the park grant once this town is reimbursed the $100,000 that's expected from the park grant, it'll be returned to the undesignated fund.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Can we discuss I have a couple questions before we move this forward. This is Megan.
Discussion?
Okay.
I need the second first so that we can discuss it.
Seconded.
Okay?
So I guess, does this change anything? We had discussed at the last meeting that if it went into the planning phases and it didn't end up going forward from there, that we would only be out a smaller amount of money. And I guess my question is, would we still be reimbursed if we only got through the planning phase and then the entire project was scrapped?
That I don't have an answer to.
Yeah,
I don't either.
yeah.
I would assume that we would not have spent all of that money, obviously.
No, we would not, because the intent from that we agreed to would be we would start out in the design phase and proceed with that and make it a priority to make sure that early in the design phase we found out if there were any issues that water couldn't be supplied for it, or it was going to use a lot more water than we anticipated, or it couldn't be drained, that we would scrap the project at that point in time to minimize the costs.
Madam
Right.
Chairman, I'd like to come back again to procedurally. Excuse me, but I'm a little bit confused here. Ed, you're saying that you personally, as town administrator, are making the request of funds for this project, or is the Parks Commission making a request for CPC funding of this project? Who is making the request?
They made a request for 86.5, which you said is unvalidated. Since the Park Commission isn't here, I'm making the request that that be adjusted to 192.5, which is the correct amount to move forward with this grant.
Except that the Parks Commission does not have the authority to apply for this grant because procedurally, they are not in possession of the properties that are involved here. So if you are acting on behalf of the Parks Commission, who does not have management of this property, again, this is an invalid request.
So I have just texted Janet Kane, who was on a little earlier, who is on the Parks Commission. I don't know if she's available. I think Dan LaValle spoke about this previously, but I don't see him present tonight either. So I don't know if Janet can come on and help us here.
Well, I would say Robert's right legally. It's the inhabitants of the town of Southampton. However, I would say the precedent-setting thing here is, in my time, and I know long before that, the Park Commission has been the maintaining authority of Conant Park.
Well, if that, excuse me, but if that is so, then why is the necessity, if I'm looking at the warrant for town meeting, then why the necessity for Part A of that warrant, which is going to appear, I presume, under a CPC request, what is the necessity for transferring management of that property from Select Board to Parks? Again,
That's a requirement of a park grant.
So if that does not get passed, Parks is not eligible for the Parks grant. And
Well, if this article doesn't pass, then we know we're not eligible for the park grant, period, because the money hasn't been authorized.
Right. Secondly, if Parks is now requesting a revised request of CPC from what was originally $86,000 to now $192,000, they are making a request that for something that they are not authorized to do. Secondly, we are not authorized to act on it. I hate to be this legal, but you know what? Somewhere along the line, this could blow up on us.
Well, here, I work directly for the Select Board. The Select Board is in favor of this particular article. The Select Board would be the authority, so I'm acting on their behalf.
And I just noticed that Janet Kane, who's on the Parks Commission, has come on. Can she be helpful on this situation?
Yeah, I come into the middle of this discussion. I think the legal side of this is probably out of my knowledge base, but I know that if there's anything I can address, I think Ed's doing a fine job at the moment. I don't think I can add anything to what Ed has been stating at this point.
Well, Randall's a member of the ex officio member, and that's why he's on CPC. And if I can go back to a precedent, we had a park grant years ago for the beginning of the Labrie Field. And I'm sure that was the Park Commission that was doing that.
Oh, it was also the Park Commission that did the pickleball.
Okay. So the Park Commission has been involved, even if it was under the authority of the Select Board, they've been involved in this.
But in my opinion, that's not the question. Certainly, they can request money for their use, just like anybody else, historic commission or anybody else can request CPC money, so long as it falls within the parameters of the CPC. What I'm saying here is that in this particular case, it appears as though right now the select board has authority for management of the parks with regard to its ability to apply for a parks grant. And Part A of the warrant that's about to come up corrects that by saying we will take that away from the select board and put it in the hands of the Parks Commission, so that now they become eligible for this parks grant, which they may or may not get, doesn't really matter. But it bothers me that we are taking this up when what I'm raising to you now as being questionable as to whether they are authorized to request this money. Because that you as representative of the board can request that, because they now have management of that. So the board could apply for this parks grant, I presume. I don't know that's for certain. But right now, what I'm saying is, as things stand today, the Parks Commission does not have the authority and is not likely to get this grant unless Part A of the warrant is passed. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's the warrant article itself. It's not Part A, it's not Part B, or not Part C.
So that will not be voted on.
They have requested the funding from the CPC.
Okay.
All right. The rest is a requirement from the state.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
And it's clearly the CPC has given the Park Commission funding in the past without any questions.
Correct. That's true.
Are there other comments or questions?
Back to my question, which I'm not sure that anyone can answer. The discussion last time was that, if $20,000 goes into the planning phase and we would be reimbursed $10,000. So I guess my biggest question is, if it doesn't end up moving forward, does that invalidate all of the grant, and therefore we're liable for $20,000 instead of 10, or $40,000 instead of 20, et cetera? I guess is my
Number
concern.
one, I can't answer that question. Number two, there's $12,500 in the design budget for this, so it's not $20,000.
It's how much?
I believe it's $12,500.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
And like I say, we can work that so that they take a look at the parameters of water usage, water availability, and drainage right off the top, so that, okay, if that's not going to work out, then we don't move forward.
Okay, so if we don't move forward, just to clarify, it's about $12,500 that we're out.
Well, I think if we don't move forward and we found out that early enough that it won't be the full 12.5, that it will be less than that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Could I ask for a reread of that motion, please?
Well, the part that affects us is that to appropriate the sum of $192,500 from the Community Preservation Act undesignated fund account for the cost of installing a walking path and splash pad and and any costs incidental or related thereto. Provided, however, that no funds shall be expended until the town has received a commitment in the amount of $100,000 under the park grant program. Any other questions? I feel there are people out there that might have some questions or comments yet, but if not, are we ready to go to a vote?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Would you state your name and yes or no?
Palmer, yes.
Kemp, nay.
Who was it?
Joseph, no.
It said nay?
I said Groden, yes.
Rini, yay?
Yes.
So it's 2 nays and 2 yays.
No, I said yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other,
Why don't you do a
Kemp,
roll
nay.
call, Virginia, just because there's so many faces on here.
okay. All right, Cindy,
I vote yes.
Janet Brown. Janet Brown.
Yeah, oh, I'm probably muted. No, I'm not muted. Yes.
Megan,
Aye.
Sierra,
Yes.
Randall,
Nay.
what?
Nay, no.
Who am I missing?
Rini,
Rini,
yes.
Bob,
No.
right. Anyone else from the committee I've missed?
Yourself?
Yes. Are there, everyone voted? Okay, that's done. And thank you. I'm just going to ask Ed one more thing.
Sure.
Find that number for our, the undesignated yet.
No, I'm looking for what I had sent you earlier in the year, and I'm not finding it real quick.
And I may have it here if you just give me a second.
Yep.
No, I'm not finding it, sorry.
Okay, well, I wasn't sure what it was, and I'm not sure that I know we had some commitments in that, so I know.
My memory was it was in the $600,000 range.
Yeah, and we've got some commitments, I think, to making a payment yearly, but it's nowhere near going to exhaust us.
Right.
I think we're okay. Now,
I think you're better than okay. But I'll keep looking for it and I'll send it out when I find it.
okay, thank you. Ed, could you give us some information before we go to the other 2 items?
Sure, absolutely. If I'm able to, I'm glad to do it.
What actually is going to happen next Tuesday night at the town meeting?
Okay. Yes, I can explain that to you. The select board is going to make a motion to move Articles 5, 11, and the 3 CPC articles 15, 16, and 17 to the front of the agenda. They are going to be discussed and voted on first. Then, once that is completed, their intent is to go back to the beginning of the article, starting with article number 1, which is unpaid bills, and then move forward numerically 2, 3, 4, and see what they can do either before there is not a quorum or until they are completed.
Okay. And hopefully we'll have a quorum to begin with.
Right. And, you know, a quorum is 50. And John made an interesting point last night. Okay, if basically the select board, if all 5 of the select board members show up, that's 10% of a quorum.
I will not be able to go.
Oh, dear.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm currently vaccinating unvaccinated people, and I'm going to be away the weekend after, and I don't think it should be held, frankly, but the select board voted in favor of it, so that's, it won't be that percent, it'll be a little bit less.
Okay.
So
we shall see.
we shall see what happens.
Yes.
I did watch the
So,
meeting.
excuse me, but my understanding then is that each of the articles beyond that, the 5 will come up separately, and you can either delay them or act on them at the meeting, depending on whether there is still a quorum there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so as a community, if I make the assumption that attendance will be tenuous anyway, as a community, we are going to allow fewer people than normally attend, which is more than I would less than I would like to see there personally, but we're going to allow that number of people to vote on these important items.
Yes.
I'm not looking for an answer to that question. I'm making a statement here.
I was going to say it was kind of rhetorical, or non-rhetorical.
Sorry,
so, yeah.
Ed. Sorry, Ed.
I get where you're coming from. Believe me, you're
Okay.
preaching to the choir.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like a lot larger quorum. I know there's a difference between the annual meeting and a special in people's minds, at least. But that is what we have. We did move it up from 25 at
It
one.
was allowed by the, I think we were given allowance for that. I don't believe we currently have an allowance from the state for that.
No, we don't. And actually, when I arrived here, I believe the quorum number was 25, and then it was increased from that while I have been town administrator. It might have been at like the first annual town meeting.
Yep, you're right.
It was. And I can remember sitting there waiting for people to call someone to come to make 25. So,
We had looked back at the attendance for several, and we were pretty much in the clear. And I think the feeling was we want these things to be voted on by a better representation of the public.
Yes, I agree with you. And Rini, I feel the same way you did. I was sitting home going,
The Board of Health recommended that we postpone it. I mean, we don't
Yes.
listen to our own Board of Health. Who do we listen to?
yeah, I heard,
Can't believe this.
but they, that's what was voted on. So
I know, I'm one vote. I accept that.
we have to go along with that, unfortunately, or maybe. So, okay, is there any other on that issue? Because I'd like to hear information from on the housing And it looks like we'll be spending some time on that at our next meeting, which will be in January. So, Sierra?
All right, thank you. So the Housing Authority has had a few talks. They've come to present to us a couple times. Bob Cannon and Todd Barron, some of you may know them. They have an idea for a housing development that would be over near the Cumberland Farms. It would have 41 units, 10 of which would be capital A affordable. They would be duplexes. And they're in the very beginning stages. You know, they're trying to figure out the right avenue to go through to get everything approved in the right order. They were asking about coming tonight. Virginia suggested we wait because they still haven't come up. We're still waiting for like some written details. We want like a full written proposal from them at the next Housing Authority meeting. We asked for more transparency about, you know, what kind of commitments, monetary commitments they have in place already, because ultimately they're going to be asking for CPA funds to support the development. And that would look something like $400,000. So it's a whole lot, but if it worked out, it would be really great. So we just wanted to sort of introduce the idea so you know what's going on. You'll hear a whole lot more about it in January with a lot more details. But I or Janet may be able to answer questions if you have any initial questions.
Does anyone have a question at this point?
Who would ultimately be the recipient of CPA funds?
They would have to show that they're going to be used just for the affordable part.
Mm-hmm.
And there would have to be there'd have to be a permanent. Now, are these for sale or are they're for sale?
Yep.
So there would have to be something written in the deed for each of those places and I don't know the exact amount it can increase, but that it wouldn't just suddenly go way up in price.
Yeah, yes, I think it's based on the consumer price index is how they work that out.
Right, and there would have to be a permanent clause in those deeds to keep them as affordable, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the plan.
Years
There's going to
ago,
be a lot of considerations about that property, just so you know, and so be prepared for that. There's going to be barriers of the aquifer. There are going to be other barriers that are going to come up. So I don't believe they've mentioned anything about, they've said up to 10 affordable houses. They haven't committed to build one yet.
that we need to be very careful about that. I was here in town, and I remember that I was probably on community preservation by then. The houses that are on Pomeroy Meadow and kind of a little road that goes back in, there was never anything permanently done about that. But when they went to the planning board, they sold it with the idea that these would be homes that people could have as starter homes for young couples or an individual from town, one of our own children, or if you wanted to retire there. And they sold as that. They really did sell as affordable homes. The next time people began to put them up for sale, they were no longer in the affordable range because they never put anything permanent on it. So that is one thing we need to be, kind of careful about. But we need to also listen and figure out what we want, if we want this or not. If so, the Housing Authority, if they decide that that's the thing to do, they will have to come and come to the committee with the project and And it will have to go to the town meeting, just like any other project. So, but it is kind of exciting that we're at least hearing something, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if it works out.
Question, who would be the recipient of the CPA funds? That's the question I asked. Who would be the recipient of these funds?
The housing authority would be in charge of them, not the builders.
Okay.
Right. It still doesn't answer my question. The housing authority is not going to, they're going to be dishing out the money to somebody. Who would be the recipient of the CPA funds?
I think it would be, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's, that has not been determined yet. So we could make up an answer, but I think we're way too early in the stages.
Oh, okay.
It would be a controlled, certainly something that's under the control of the housing authority where it's gone, and it would be deed restriction, and which the ones on Pomeroy Meadow were not deed restricted. They were affordable lower A, not uppercase A. So I don't mean to cut you off, Sarah, but they're definitely, that it's just too soon to really give you an honest, clear answer, but.
Okay. Well, Bob asked earlier, who's requesting the funds? And I just, similarly, I'm just asking, like, who's requesting the funds?
Yeah, nobody's requesting at this point in time, but we want to help educate the community preservation when that point comes, when we have something in writing from them. And the same documentation is filled out that has to be filled out for every project and the details. And so it's just too early really to answer that question.
Okay.
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 The time of presentation, we'll definitely have that answer. When we come to you, if we come to you for a yes request, we will have the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Community preservation funds were used in a very nice and cooperative way in Goshen. It's a very small complex, and they weren't the only, because Goshen doesn't have the people to have the funds and their housing authority that we might for them. But it was done, and I understand they're very lovely. They were lucky. The land was something the town originally owned. I don't remember what. And it was given over to this project. But it was a cooperative thing because they're going to have other monies than ours to complete this. And we're going to need to know all those things. But I'm finding it really kind of exciting to finally hear something's happening and that we may have something going on here in town. Any other questions on the housing?
Can I just respond, Cindy, real quick to Virginia's comment about Goshen? So Goshen was a Hilltown Community Development Corp project. It did receive money from the state. Therefore, I don't think very many residents and it was for senior housing, I believe, and very few residents of Goshen actually qualified for the AMI to actually utilize those units. So there's a lot of contention once you bring in funds from the state to support a project like this, that you lose a lot of control of, who actually gets to utilize them. And they are rental projects. They're rental facilities, not for purchase. So I just wanted to add, and I'll dismiss myself again. Thank you.
My question was, I didn't catch the place on Pomeroy Meadow Road where this project you're talking about, Virginia, it was formerly town land. Where was that?
Right after you leave College Highway and go down a little ways. It's before you get to the school. There's a line of new
22 Pomeroy Meadow Road. It's where the condos are.
The condos.
It's what it
back on the drive.
I mean,
it's before the school, starting from the post office on the right.
Yeah, the affordable housing, not affordable housing, the condos.
Pomeroy Villages, I believe, is what you're referring to.
Oh, okay. And I thought those were age restricted. I thought They're not age restricted.
But
Oh.
because of the building of them and because there's no basements in most of them and they're small, I think it turned out that a lot of seniors did purchase them, but it's not age restricted.
No, but there are some young people that live there too, singles and couples,
Right.
or have.
Yeah, it's not age restricted.
Okay. Okay.
Nor is it citizens only. I mean, people that have lived in Southampton. That gets kind of iffy. I do know the one in Goshen has, a lot of their people came from Williamsburg. So, and Cindy has something to talk about. She
Right.
wanted to-
Thank you. I just want to bring before the committee just two, Virginia thought it was a good idea that I at least bring before you another potential two projects that would be open space projects. One of them is the possibility that we would be coming before CPC, and I say the Open Space Committee, to request monies for the acquisition, purchase of undeveloped, landlocked property, which is directly abutting town-owned property at the end of Wolcott Road. It's formerly been called Durrell's Path. There's been a new path that's gone on town property called the Great Mountain Trail. I think Megan had a lot to do with that from what I understand, and I walked on it a few weeks ago. It's quite beautiful. There's two parcels. One is 40 acres, one is approximately 12 acres right next to those. The town, utilizing my name as chairperson of Open Space, has made an offer for a contract to purchase the larger of the two parcels. I checked the mailbox today at the town hall. We have not had a response from the owner at this point. The second parcel we are just beginning to think about, and I'll be talking about that with the Open Space Committee tomorrow evening. We've also learned about a grant possibility that would cover 50% of the cost of the purchase. We've made tentative connections with the grant person at the state level. Her name is Megan Crean. I think that's her name. And we need to just let her know if we're potentially interested before the 17th of December. So it's all kind of moving quickly here. I am not making a formal request to CPC at this time. I'm just letting you know that this may come after the first of the year if the landowners are willing to enter into an agreement to buy the property. Now, it would only be for the appraised value. We would not be able to go above an appraisal. That's standard. And part of the contingency for the offer to the landowner that's been made so far is that they would allow us to bring in a qualified appraiser to do that. So that's just general information for everybody at this point. No vote. You're welcome to ask me any questions. I'm not using landowners' names at this time. I can give you lot numbers and map numbers if you need them, but it's right up there next to what's formerly called Durrell's Path. I don't know what the right name for it is right now. The second is an actual situation that's the landowners went directly to Kestrel Land Trust. It's for 80 plus acres off Pomeroy Meadow Road, down towards, I should say, up towards the Easthampton line, directly over the north branch of the Manhan River. The property owners are the Courtney family, and they're very eager to actually sell it outright, but they wish to make have this available for conservation, this land. And a representative from Kestrel and I went to the water commissioners today. They are extremely interested in this property. This is absolutely key property, which serves our town wells. This is extremely important property in terms of the recharge. They didn't do a formal vote. They didn't have a full commission present. They just indicated how valuable this would be. The appraised value of this land is $385,000, but a land a grant for water protection will be applied for by Kestrel on behalf of our town that would cover 50% of the cost. So this will be another situation where we will be going before CPC asking for that money, and it will not occur for probably a year and a half. So we don't have this before our town meeting coming in May. This is just everything. These things take such a great deal of time, as you well know. But this one is a pretty valuable one in terms of water protection in our town. So these are just general statements. They can go into the minutes. Janet, if I spoke too quickly, I'll be happy to supply more detail for your minutes if it's helpful for you. And I'll take any questions you might like to ask.
Cindy, is there a map that shows these key parcels? Because it seems like I hear a lot. There is one. Okay.
The map, I have this map of the second one. Do you want me, I can drop it off for you. Do you want me to give you the maps?
Available online anywhere?
Say again, Randall?
Is it available online anywhere, or could it be emailed?
I'll ask the Kestrel representative. Her name is Bridget Lively. She's a new employee there working with Mark Walmsley. I'll ask her to email it to you and me, okay?
All right,
Randall,
thanks.
are you asking about key parcels for the water recharge?
Yeah, we bought that land on Pomeroy Meadow, and then 3 houses went up right across the street. I don't get the connection there.
All of that data is actually available on the Mass GIS data layers, which used to be Mass Oliver, but is now the Mass Muni Mapper. And I can send you a link at some point if you want, so you can just pull it up yourself if you want to look.
Excellent.
But you know, Randall, you're raising an extremely important point. We are over the Barnes Aquifer, a large portion of our actual town, as you know. You made the point that Pomeroy Meadow had development across the street from the land that was acquired, but by the Water Commission. And earlier there was a mention of a potential new project that would go in off Gun Road and at the corner of College Highway and Gun Road, a very large project. It's been brought up by the housing, which also could be looked at as over some key water protection areas.
Well, I guess that's my question. How are we picking and choosing which ones we're supporting and which ones we're not? What's the criteria?
I think we always need the Water Commission's input on these things, for one thing. Yes.
Okay. There, the open space plan had mentioned some different areas of town to concentrate on, and I know in my neighborhood, nothing's been looked at that I know of.
None of them look what?
Up on Fomer was identified as one of the potential places for land acquisition, and I haven't seen anything talked about there. But I've been talking to several landowners. I don't have anything formal to tell you. And way up on Fomer, several. Yep. So good.
Randall,
sorry.
Oh, sorry. That's a really good point, and I can kind of weigh in a little bit. What we draw from is actually part of the Barnes Aquifer, but it's disconnected hydraulically from the rest of the Barnes Aquifer. So that would just be something in the future that we might want to start thinking about, is just looking at the recharge for the specific part that we actually draw from and protecting that, as opposed to not protecting the rest of the aquifer, but since we're kind of hydraulically disconnected. So.
Right. It might also help to get some sort of zoning restrictions in that area, even if you have frontage lots or whatever, to restrict the use of pesticides, herbicides, and all that stuff. But that's a coordinated effort with planning. If only there was somebody who was on both planning and open space.
There is.
I know.
A retired nurse. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, right. But you absolutely make an important point. And I will say I'm so impressed by our Water Commission, because number one, they know what they're talking about. Number two, Joe Slattery is just a walking, history of all that's going on in the town and our development. And I told him that I think we should tape him every time he speaks, because he seems to know so much about what happened in the last 40 and 50 years. about things. So kudos to them, really, because they really want it done right for our town.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this? So we're going to have things to listen for and deal with in the new year. So I guess, unless anyone has something else that's really pertinent.
I have a question, Virginia.
Yeah.
So we had a joint meeting with the Housing Authority and the Planning Board last week discussing bylaw reviews with this gentleman, Richard, who is a consultant. They had a grant initially to pay for the bylaw review, but the overarching question was for future, so that they did the initial like bylaw review just to sort of codify it and make it all neat and clean. Like that's the one that they're trying to push through for this year. But after that, they want to really dig in and make substantial necessary changes. And there's a lot of zoning bylaws, well, not a lot, but there's a couple of zoning bylaws that are related to housing. There's the inclusionary zoning, cluster development, and multifamily homes that we really want to dig into and make them more effective. And the question was, is there CPA funding that could help pay for this consultant specifically for the housing related changes?
Probably. I would want to look into it a little bit, but I would say using some of the funds that are allocated in the Housing Authority would probably be the way to go.
Yeah, all right.
Into it. I've had some strange requests and get some laughs on some of them. Well, yeah, I had a fairly recent one. And I went to the Coalition, Community Preservation Coalition, which is where I go to get information when I don't know. And it just reminded me I got to tell that woman no way for what she wanted, but that's another issue. I could check with them, but I don't see why a consultant, you couldn't use some of those funds.
All right. That's promising. That's promising. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just correct you, Sierra, slightly on that?
Sure.
You said you thought the planning board had a grant. It really wasn't a grant. What it was like I guess we call it our revolving fund, where when somebody comes before the planning board and has to pay a fee to file for an A&R or something, then they pay the fee, but we just haven't had a high volume of those. And the funds have been rapidly depleting because of the zoning bylaw review that's gone on for more than 3 years since it preceded my time on the board. So just to clarify that, it's running out. And given that housing is a very critical part of this, that's, I think, why Paul Dieman asked you that question about whether there was any other way to pay for it. So that's...
Any ballpark on what we've spent on it so far?
I'd be guessing, Randall. Call Paul.
Okay. Just
Are
curious.
there any other questions or things that really need to come before us?
Don't all of these bylaws still have to be run by our attorney, which will be an additional fund, correct, Ed?
That's correct.
Yep.
And the bylaws committee's been working very hard to move forward, town bylaws. So, and it's been tempered by the funding for the lawyer. So I imagine that would play a role as well.
Oh, yes.
When we're checking on whether we can use them for the consultant for zoning bylaws, can we also check to see if it's appropriate to use it for Copeland and Page review? That would be nice, but it doesn't have to come out of general fund.
I don't think it'll fit community preservation. Only if it was tied with the housing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The one specifically that Sarah was mentioning, getting updated, anything to do with housing, we can use the funds for those bylaws. It would be nice to also use them for Copeland and Page review of those bylaws.
Well, I can check on it. But the zoning would have to be the one to ask for it.
You mean the planning board? Because the zoning board is not doing the bylaw review, the planning board is.
The planning board is.
Yeah,
Okay.
the planning board is doing zoning bylaw review.
Well, that's interesting.
It's been that way for years, yep.
Is there anything else that anyone wants to ask, say? If not,
Happy holidays.
happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
And now do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Anyone that's
Bye-bye. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
in favor of adjourning?
Are we going to do roll call?
Happy holidays again.
Good night.
Here's my vote.